I am Carol Burdett, and I'm the CEO of United Way of Anderson County, and I want to thank you for coming out tonight. We are talking yet again about a critical issue in our community. Now, I have very big shoes to fill because at the opening of all of our other conversations, we have had the coroner, and he hoodooed me. He said he was going to be out of town, but he got back early. But I just couldn't talk him into coming up and talking. But Greg, we are delighted that you are with us. Greg Shore, our coroner, has been very involved with this project from the very beginning and sees a great need for us to look at, in particular from his viewpoint, the deaths that are come from the crime and violence within our community. And we are thankful that you're here, Greg. Also, we want to thank County Bank and Glenn Budden. Glenn is with us this evening for allowing us the opportunity through some financial resources to deal with conversations around mental health, addiction, lack of conflict resolution skills, and as we talk about tonight, gang violence. We have said from the very start, to be successful in looking at these issues within our community, we must look at the root causes. These are root causes. But we are not only looking at these issues, we are listening. And we are going to be learning. And that is exactly why you are here this evening. We want you to hear from the panelists, and believe me, we have an excellent group of panelists who are professionals in the area of dealing with gang violence and the proliferation of gangs. But we want you to learn from them, but then we want to hear from you. We cannot begin a successful action plan without the input of a diverse voice of folks within our community. So tonight we are delighted to have with us Lieutenant Robert Gebbing. He is in criminal investigations with the Anderson County Sheriff's Office. Investigator Joshua Black, who is also an investigator with the Anderson County Sheriff's Office. We have with us Assistant Solicitor Christopher Beeco with the 10th Circuit Solicitor's Office. Craig Gardner, who is an investigator with the Anderson City Police Department. And we have my friend and the one that is responsible for getting all of these people to the table tonight, Staff Sergeant Mark Gregory. He now serves as a supervisor with the Anderson County Sheriff's Office, supervising school resource officers and school crossing guards. At one time in his life, he worked for the best mayor in Anderson County. I'll just leave it at that. And he is a true professional and an expert. And you're going to be blown away by what these folks say tonight, and we will come back as they finish up their presentations with Charles Weathers. We are delighted to have Charles with us again from the Weathers group, and we're going to be able to give you an opportunity to ask questions, give feedback, and then we'll wrap up the evening, and we'll try to do that as we scheduled around 7 o'clock. So Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you again for being here.
What most of you don't know is that you're in the infancy stages of having a bird's eye view of the criminal justice system, and everything that we do, be it police officers, solicitors, coroners, it all starts with a two-way conversation. We don't know how things are, we don't really know what's happening in our community until somebody says, "Hey Mark, I just got robbed at the gas station. What can you do for me?" I'm like, "I can start an investigation. How about that?" And then we'll find the people that did it, we'll arrest them, we'll send them over to the solicitor's office, they'll prosecute them and put them in prison for the rest of their life. That's the criminal justice system in a nutshell. So we have a unique opportunity tonight to start a conversation. And what's really unique about this conversation that we're having tonight is it allows us to hopefully get in front of a problem to find out what's happening in the community and then head that off at the pass so we don't have future problems. Does that make sense? Fantastic. This is a two-way conversation. We are not presenting anything tonight. I have no presentation, no pictures, no awesome stories for you. However, we're going to be happy to answer any questions that you may have in the hopes that we can best serve you in Anderson County. Again, my name is Mark Gregory. I've currently been at the Sheriff's Office for about 16 years. I started my law enforcement career in the Marine Corps as a military police officer. Somehow got transferred into military police investigations as a gang investigator out at Camp Pendleton, which is between San Diego and Los Angeles. So I spent some time hearing from people working the real gangs in the world. Got to Anderson, South Carolina, began my law enforcement career here in the town of Pendleton, and somehow started to see that our wannabe gang members here in Anderson, South Carolina were doing the exact same things they were doing in California, just under a different name or a different umbrella. Like I said, I've done numerous things at the Sheriff's Office, been here for 16 years, and I really enjoy being a police officer. It is my lifelong goal and career. I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Gebbing and let him tell a little bit about himself, and we'll kind of go down the line so you have an idea who's speaking to you tonight or who's answering your questions, and then from here we'll start opening up the questions. All right?
My name is Rob Gebbing. I'm currently the lieutenant. I run the Criminal Investigations Division at the Anderson County Sheriff's Office. I've been there since 2001, and kind of like Mark, I started off in the military before that. I spent 5 years in the Army as an MP, so that's my overall experience. I spent a few years on road patrol and handling dogs, and I got into investigations in 2005, where I've pretty much been ever since. If the topic tonight is gangs, my involvement there is, me and Mark started working at gangs before gangs was cool. I mean, it was a hobby. I was working violent crimes and property theft and things of that nature, and come to find out all these guys were wearing a certain color, using a certain name, and oh well, this must be something that I'm interested in. So we just found that we were chasing gang members, but for not necessarily gang motivated crimes, and that's kind of how we got into it, and it's just blossomed from there. When Sheriff McBride came in this past January, he put me in my current position. Prior to that, I was working gangs with Mark and another guy on a full-time basis. So that's my overall experience in a nutshell. I hate to say it, but I've been drinking from the fire hose since January 3rd, so my gang stuff has fallen off a little bit because I'm now a little responsible for a little bit of everything. But I'll do the best I can this evening. So.
Hi, I'm Josh Black. I work with the Sheriff's Office. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I started out in law enforcement back in 2006. I worked down at Lawrence City. I transferred to Anderson in 2009. I worked the road for a couple of years. During that time, I'll tell you a little bit about it, why I became interested in the gangs. I was over on East Market Street one day, stopped a guy walking down the street, him and 3 other guys. Start talking to the guy. While I'm talking to him and 3 others were talking to each other in a different language, something I've never heard. The lingo, the way their hand signs. I let the 3 go. As they started walking off, one took off running. I looked down next to the grassy area where they were standing. There were 2 guns laying there. So at that point, I contacted a lieutenant with the city, Jeff Mosier. He explained to me the situation. He said, yeah, those are 4 documented gang members. At that point, I said, I'm interested. Through that process, I met Mark Gregory and Rob Gebbing. Mark is probably one of the reasons why I'm still in it. He taught me a lot, and hey, I'm just trying to better Anderson County by doing this job and making everybody else happy. So I'll turn it over to Craig Gardner.
My name is Craig Gardner. I'm with the Anderson City Police Department. I've been with Anderson for 5 years now, and I work in the Gang Intelligence Unit. We also have the name CAT Team, which is the Community Action Team, but I specifically do gang intelligence for the City of Anderson. Prior to coming to Anderson, I worked for Greenville for 21 and a half years. I was the Sergeant over Street Crimes Unit there, and I worked specifically gangs and drug activity. Altogether, I've been working gangs off and on for about 18 years. Some of my training through the years of working gangs, I've been fortunate enough to go to the National Gang Summit in Washington, D.C. And I've been able to cross-train with several major agencies across the U.S., just a couple like Miami, L.A., Chicago, and Washington, D.C. And one of my interests was working Hispanic gangs. And luckily, that landed me a opportunity to work with the FBI National Tracking Center in D.C. on working MS-13 and SIR-13 gang crimes and how they track their gang members across the U.S. But here in Anderson, I focus on the gangs that we have here, such as Bloods, Crips, Folks, and a few other side groups that are claiming their gang status in the city and county, and spend a lot of my time working social media, doing interviews, and trying to solve crimes in the city. And of course, anything we get outside the city, we get in touch with the sheriff's office and try to help them out as well. I suppose the biggest thing that I can say is important for us is our availability of information, and that we work together and share this information and help each other out a lot.
I'm Christopher Beeco. Not really sure where to start. 2002, I started law enforcement. I was actually a police officer. I've worked with these guys in some form or fashion, especially dealing with gangs. Greg Gardner taught me a lot when I first started doing gangs, which was around about 2006-07. Mark and I shared some interest on the FBI task force together, and I know I've dealt with Rob Gebbing on a few things as well. Fast forward a little bit, I started law enforcement in Greenville. I worked at Malden for a period of time. After Malden, I came over here to Anderson County, kind of changed positions in life, and I considered a new approach and started law school, finished law school. Now I'm at the solicitor's office. So I do have some gang knowledge, but much like Rob, I've kind of gotten away from gangs and focused more on criminal prosecution. So I'm aware of it. It is an issue, but that's kind of how I've gotten involved with this as well.
What I'll be doing this evening is facilitating the dialogue between the participants and the audience tonight. And now is your time to talk. We want your questions, your input, your suggestions, your recommendations. As we talk about crafting the future and moving forward and do what we can to make Anderson the best place to be and best place to live, work, and play, so to speak, you have a wealth of knowledge here in front of you today. So we want to ask questions or share information that they need to know. So who wants to go first? I've got a few questions myself, but I'm going to hold back a little bit. Yes, ma'am, what's your question?
As a public school teacher, I would like to know what to look for in my classroom as far as signs, but more importantly, within my own family.
I'll give you an example. Monday, I got a phone call from Randy Alexander. He's the SRO at Tijuana. He sent me a picture, ma'am.
What's S?
School resource officer. He sent me a picture of a drawing that the principal obtained from a 9th grade student. It was a pitchfork on one side, and it was a 6-pointed star. The way the star was drawn, I recognized that belonged to a Folk Nation gang sign. In that area, or where Tijuana is, it's associated more with what we call black gangster disciples. The principal called me, we spoke a little bit. The principal asked me what he thinks he should do. I said, first off, you should bring the student in, talk to him, see what the sign meant, see what he meant, and then call his mother. Well, he dug into it. About 3 hours later, he called me, and the student apparently is affiliated with some type of gang, and he did suspend him. However, the point of it is not to suspend a student, but make the teachers and principals aware of the situation. Does that make sense? If little assistance down there?
See, Josh has been working gangs for quite a while, but he hasn't had the opportunity to speak in public. So he gets all of the questions tonight. We're just here to watch and dwell on his pain. No, but one of the best investigators in the history of best investigators is Josh Black. He really knows what he's doing, and he knows what he's talking about. One thing that I would look for is anything abnormal. If it's weird drawings, if it's something that is consistently the same, be it 5-pointed stars, 6-pointed stars, anything that you might go, what is that? That doesn't make any sense. And then you would start asking questions.
One of the things I think keeps gang members from coming forward is the risk of being further targeted if they know, if the gangs members or the gangs know that a particular student has been targeted or identified, this is further exposure for the kids.
The risk of getting out of the game.
Right.
Part of what we do is we go out and investigate gang-related behavior. We typically focus on criminal activity. Because if we focus strictly on gangs, being in a gang, it gets us absolutely nowhere. It's not illegal to be in a gang. It's illegal to commit the criminal activity. So we don't typically go to somebody and say, hey, you're in trouble because you're in a gang. We would go up to a person, be it in a school or on the street or in our community, and ask them why. Why do you do this? And you soon understand that they do it because they have to eat. They do it for protection. They do it to feed their family. They do it to take care of their siblings. They do it because they're uneducated. And they do it because they don't like authority. So if you take all of those aspects into consideration, you end up getting what we would consider an at-risk youth that can fall into gang behavior and then become a gang member and then commit this criminal activity, which is ultimately what we go after and put them in prison for. To answer your question, we do go to the schools, we give presentations, we speak to whoever needs to be spoken to or wants to be spoken to, and we let them know what is happening in our community. And at the end of the presentation, we ask, how can we help? What is it what problems are you seeing within your little pockets of Anderson County? And from there, we take this information and we're able to apply it to our investigations to have a more successful outcome. Does that answer your question, sir?
Well, it helps.
It was very interesting question. I've never had that.
Could I ask a few more on this?
Absolutely.
You named a multitude of reasons why children would be in gangs. Would you please help us understand how we can get rid of that basic problem here in Anderson? That would be a way, would you name those reasons one more time and then give me some methodology, education, whatever, break down family life, whatever is happening? I would like for us to understand in this town that we have enough caring people, not only in the protection of others, but in dealing with the problems. Our children shouldn't be there.
Yes, ma'am, I'll do my best.
Thank you.
And then I'm going to turn it over to Chris Beeco, who has a
No,
master's
don't.
and a law degree, and he is much smarter than I am. But I'm gonna build the foundation for him, hopefully, and I hope I build a good house. What's interesting within your question is that's the entire reason for all of our community conversations that we've had over the past 2 months, 3 months.
Right.
And it starts with conflict resolution, and it goes into drugs and the opium epidemic that our country is facing and our county is facing. It goes into poverty. It goes into education. And each of these elements that all of us face, we either choose or don't choose to use drugs, okay? So all of these elements that exist create a ladder. And some people in society do not want to climb the ladder. They want to get from the bottom to the top without having to climb each rung.
Gotcha.
That creates a problem, okay? I believe that, unfortunately, we have only so much time here tonight, and the question that you pose and the answer that I would love to give is a book. And unfortunately, we only have a chapter to deal with tonight. But Chris is going to try and follow up and figure out if he can answer this question a little bit better.
Not even really sure where to start. The only way, when I was listening to it, I don't know really how to answer it in my capacity, but I can answer it from previous investigations dealing with gangs in Greenville. We had multiple meetings with, it was under Steve Loftus when he was the sheriff, where we would come together and we would get church organizations, different outreach groups. Everybody would come together and we'd try to talk about different methods to address these gangs and what we can do to try to resolve them. And what I noticed from those meetings, everybody just wanted to point fingers at each other. There was no real resolutions, and a lot of times people want to pass blame and say, well, why isn't law enforcement arresting more people? Why isn't the prosecutors prosecuting more people? Why are the judges letting them out of jail? So, and then you had parents wanting to know why their kids are doing stuff at school, and you had the school wanting to know why the parents are not raising the kids. So everybody was pointing the fingers at everybody. So
The way of the world.
yeah. So what I did notice, I noticed a few things, and this is just off of my observations. There's no scientific method. There's nothing of that such to where I've conducted any kind of independent research. But what I would say is most of the time you saw the things that I saw kids that were not really involved with their families. Let's say, I'll just give a random example. Let's say it's a mother who's working 2 or 3 jobs, maybe the dad's not home, he's out in the street, he's being raised by the peers out in the street. So you would have things of that such starting to come about, and maybe they get into this criminal element, and then they start pushing back from whatever you consider societal norms, maybe family rearing, how the kid's supposed to act at home. They're not going to comply with family wishes. They're going to actually go out and try to make money, or they're going to do whatever they can do. So the thing that I noticed, the biggest thing I noticed is there was things at homes not being addressed by the parents. And then it's left for the government in whatever shape or fashion. It could be the school, it could be law enforcement, it could be whatever. They were looking to the schools and they were looking to law enforcement to resolve simple problems, where I think some of the foundation could be attacked at home. I'm not putting it all on the parents, but what I'm saying is there's a culpability on each party involved. It's not an easy response, not an easy solution, but I think it is an environment problem. And that's about the best I can do to explain that.
Maybe there's no concrete answer, the two-parter. How many gangs are there, different gangs in Anderson County, and to what degree are they? Are they really hardcore bangers out here killing 3 or 4 people every weekend, or are they down here wearing colors just because it's kind of a cool thing to do? How can you answer that?
How many gangs there are in Anderson?
Yeah, 4, 5, 10, 12 different.
Well, for the most part, I would say you have, we classify gangs by the national names. Like you have Bloods, Crips, or Folk. So outside of those 3, you're going to have subgroups, and I would say in each one of those, you've probably got active a good 3 to 5 subgroups in each one. These gangs are territorialized. They're like in communities, based on schools, based on prior friendships. I don't want to throw the names of the gangs out there because I don't want to glorify them. I'm not going to call the names of the subgroups, but they have names that they're the something, something, something Bloods. But you have, like I say, 3 to 5 groups of each one around the city and county of Anderson. Out of those groups, you most of the time only have 1 or 2 that are somewhat active, and they're feuding with each other within their own gangs, or they're feuding with their rival gangs.
What do you mean by active? What does active mean?
Active being when we have to deal with them, when they're actually out committing crimes that we're aware of. Gang members are always up to something. I mean, it's not a secret that if you're in a gang, you're selling dope, or you're helping somebody sell dope, or you're running errands, or you're doing something for somebody you answer to. There's a hierarchy in every gang. Everybody's doing something for somebody. But the active members are the ones that we deal with on not necessarily day-to-day exchange, but we may deal with them once or twice a week, or more than that. But I know y'all hear of some of the shootings that's on the news. A lot of times shootings get reported as being random. They get reported as being drug-related. Some of them may get reported as domestic. And then you have crimes like burglaries or auto break-ins, and you only think of a thief. But when you find out who the people are committing these crimes, you get to seeing that they're involved with these gangs that we investigate daily. And then you start realizing that a lot more of these crimes are gang-related in our eyes because we're dealing with that gang member. Most of the shootings that we deal with, I don't have a problem standing here and tell you that probably 90% of the shootings we have are gang-related. Either it was a retaliation on another gang member or it was a gang member doing the shooting, if that makes any sense to you. They might walk out on the street corner in the neighborhood where they live and just start shooting a pistol up in the air. To me, that's gang-related because it's a gang member shooting a gun in the city that could cause harm to someone else. Just the same as it would be if you had two rival gang members that saw each other in passing and didn't like each other and exchanged words, and 30 minutes later they're driving by each other's houses shooting it up. So in the city alone, and here again, I do the intelligence work in the city, but I keep up with a lot of people in the county as well that Josh deals with and Lieutenant and Sergeant here have dealt with in the past. But the reason I keep up with some of those and track those as well is because they're not just their problem, they're my problem. They live in the county, but they come and do things in the city. And just in my database, I've got over 400 people that are identified as gang members. And probably a third of them I would consider active. So maybe that answers your question.
Very good, thank you.
I want to follow that, piggyback that a little bit. I taught middle school in the 80s in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so there were a lot of students who were recruited by gangs from Chicago. And so before school started, before the calendar year, this goes back to what Carol had said, we had the police, law enforcement come to the school and talk to us teachers for 2 hours about the main gangs that were in Milwaukee. And a lot of times I knew because they doodled all over their papers. And so I could say to them, and they'd say, "How do you know my gang name?" I said, "It's right there." You have it all over your paper. So that's just for your information. But we found that very helpful as teachers. The second one is, because of that, I wanted to know, you mentioned a 13-year-old, but is that the youngest you have seen that where you suspect that are involved with gangs, or are there younger children than that?
Typically, the ages of young kids we classify as at-risk youth, okay? Gang members typically start to form, or at least their mentality begins in middle school, and that's where they begin to learn, build a foundation of gang knowledge. And then in high school, they start to commit very minor crimes, or they become just unruly within the school system, and it kind of builds from there. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we have a 3-year-old who's a gang member. Have I seen 3-year-olds wear gang-related clothing and hold up gang signs? I have, but they were being taught that by their older sibling. The scariest, youngest gang member that Anderson City and County has ever seen is a gentleman who executed 2 12-year-olds in the back of the head, and he was 11 or 12 at the time. He spent a couple of years in prison, and he had to be released at age 21 because the juvenile laws, he might have been 10, and that's the reason why he was released at 21. Happened on Railroad Street in the city. That gentleman got released from prison a couple of years ago, and we bought a sawed-off rifle from him. He was trying to sell us some grenades, and he is currently in federal prison right now. Unfortunately, the youngest person that I ever heard about committing a heinous crime as a gang member was around that 10-year-old mark, and he is somebody we had to remove from society. He's gone for a long time. I hope that answers your question.
When they go into the court system, what kind of sentences are we looking at, or are they able to be kept in there? Maybe not the juveniles, but as an adult, how long are they staying in, and how do we go about monitoring them when they're out?
Well, the reality of the matter is state law is very weak with dealing with gang members. basically the solicitor's office stance is it's the same as any other crime coming through the solicitor's office, because your statutes, we don't have gang enhancements like that of other states, like you would see in California or any other state. So that would be more of a question of how the legislator feels about creating better statutes for law enforcement to enforce. So to answer your question, they're handled no differently than any other party that comes into the solicitor's office. Does that answer?
A lot of time and a lot of energies is spent on the little fish, but little time and effort on the big fish. So that's my question. How far up are we really looking when we come to gang members and drug trafficking?
Our job here is to catch the little fish, because the little fish are causing major, major problems in our community. Major problems. Be it credit card theft, drug trafficking, drug using, assaults, robberies, you name it, they commit it. How far up do we go? We've taken off $1 million. We've seized in excess of 20 kilograms of cocaine. We have, which is a lot of money. We have invited gang members to commit a robbery with us and kill some drug traffickers out of Mexico. We had to meet with them 4 times so the United States Attorney would prosecute the case. And we caught them, and then they gave us other things because they have absolutely no choice but to talk to us when you stand in front of a federal judge and you plead to life. You have to work that life sentence down to a number that you can manageably do in federal prison. It all started with little fish here in Anderson County. We've been to Wilmington, North Carolina, been to Las Vegas. We've been all over this country, Houston, Texas, doing what we can to curb criminal activity inside of Anderson County, but also give any intel that we get to any other agency in this country that could prevent the drugs or the guns from getting to this county. And it's a constant battle. It started way before I got into law enforcement, and it will continue after I retire. All we can do is do our part. All I can do is ask for help. Like tonight, please help. Please call us. Please tell us what you see. And I promise any little bit of information that you give us, we will turn into an investigation. We will put somebody into jail, and that will turn into somebody going to prison. And the information we get from that person will turn over to the solicitor's office and say you need to plead guilty to life. However, I'm willing to work with you. If you tell me what you know, I'll give you a number.
12 years ago, I was part of a community gang task force that a council person, Gracie Floyd, had organized and recognized the best from that. I guess I have 2 questions. One, is there anything still like that in existence where not only is it you guys coming together, but community members and folks that work with young people, educators and church folks and things like that? And so that was back in the mid-2000s. How is the gang problem today compared to back then? Did we make any difference, and is it time to reorganize community efforts, I guess is my question.
The group you're speaking of we held our meetings largely down at that Fusion warehouse.
Yes,
As you
yes.
recall,
Right.
a lot of that was all funded by grants.
Right.
And as with most grants, eventually the money dries up, and therefore so does a lot of the efforts that go along with it. So unfortunately, outside of some groups like this or some concerned citizens, these meetings are fewer and farther between.
Right.
We do what we do because we're friends and we have a common interest in it. So I mean, that's why we're still together. But the groups, yeah, it's not like it was where we had a regularly scheduled thing and there was always something to address. And it's unfortunate because a lot of it just is contingent on funding and resources. You know, in a perfect world, that would have never died down and it would continue to build. But as you've seen, yeah, some of the faces remain the same. As far as the difference between the gangs back then and the gangs now, they're still out committing largely the same crimes, but it's my personal opinion they've just gotten better at it. I mean, I don't mean for it to sound funny, but it kind of is. They've gotten very, very. These aren't. Don't get me wrong. These aren't dumb people. They just make poor decisions. They've gotten very good at manipulating the system. they've gotten very good at the legal terminologies, and nowadays, and they've got support from their peer group and sometimes their families. And so they know how to ask for a motion of discovery, and they know how to intimidate the people who've given statements against them. And I hate to say it, that's becoming more and more the challenge. It's not just locking them up, it's making it stick. I can get somebody today for shooting a guy down the street. 6 months, a year later, when we're now trying to go to court, are these witnesses going to be willing to come and tell me what they told me today? And that's why I say they're getting, in some regards, they're getting better at it. Oddly enough, the guys that we were chasing in 2002, 2003, some of them have gotten out of it, some of them went to prison, some of them have been killed. But there's always a younger generation coming up, and they always feel like they have something to prove. So they're still doing the same crimes. They're still shooting at each other, robbing stores, robbing each other. A lot of those we don't even know about. Somebody goes and steals somebody's load of dope, they're not going to call us and tell us about it unless somebody gets shot. So, yeah, that's my personal opinion on it, and I think some would agree.
Are the gangs that we're dealing with here, is it mostly
drugs, gun, or is there any sex trafficking going on that they're involved with, or is that a whole nother crime alone?
There is on a smaller scale. Predominantly the ones that we find ourselves dealing with is the drugs, the guns, and the violent crimes that go along with it. There are Homeland Security, heads a sex trafficking task force, and that's not as prevalent with our locals. It does happen, but we had, who was Terrence with? Yeah, 3 or 4 years ago, we had a pretty prevalent blood who was involved in that, and we ended up getting him, and he's back on probation and all that. But I would say the vast majority of our stuff at the local level is the drugs, the guns, the violence against each other, and the petty crimes.
And then my next question is, what about females in gangs? That happens, right?
It does. It does. I mean, they're either participants or they're support networks. So they're not oblivious, and they don't know. They're not going to tell me they don't know what their either siblings, boyfriends, fathers of their kids are up to. And unfortunately, they're rather supportive of it. Even not just female relationships. What about mothers?
Right.
Chris spoke before, and he used a term that I'm fond of, societal norms, and it's just my opinion, but it seems to me like there's just been a drastic shift in societal norms. People are more willing to tolerate a certain amount of stuff. Cooperating with the police and cooperating with community groups is taboo now, and there are a lot of times, there are some concerned parents out there, but there's just as many who they don't want to hear what we've got to say.
Well, because that's their breadwinner, right? I mean, that's their...
Sometimes it's not even that. I've listened. We have access to their phone calls at jail, and I mean, I've heard guys talk to their mother, and their mother's like cheering them on for the stuff that they've gotten arrested for, and it's just that's what's disheartening. The shift in societal norms, I think, is what's driving a lot of this, but I can't really prove it.
Tag on to that, and this lady's question up here a while ago about what are the causes of it. You were very polite about it. I think you had a pretty good answer. I'll give you my opinion now. I'm going to blame it on the parents, period. Or failure of parenting. I know you mentioned the schools, and the parents in the schools point fingers at one another. The school's purpose is to educate, not to raise the children in all aspects. Now, they're doing a lot of that because they have to. They don't have any choice right now. I go back to too many unwed pregnancies, too many single-parent households, too many households where the parents just don't care. I've been on the County Board of Education. I've seen and heard the horror stories that go along with it. And I'm on the County Council now, and I'm seeing the other end of it. Parents don't go to the PTO meetings. They never go to teacher's night. They never pay any attention to the child's homework. In some cases, a single-parent household, the mother or the father in that case, is maybe holding down 2 jobs. They have no time to take care of the child. That's where the problems, I think, stem from. And the solution to those problems are extremely difficult. And I'll throw drugs into that mix too. You guys have got an uphill battle.
You said that social media was being used to try to help to curb the gang activity. Do you have the information that we could go to for that social media? And also with that, go into that information. There's a lot of education on that, particularly about how to make you aware, because I was hearing from the panel that you guys need help from the community, but I think the big issue is that we need to be more educated and not be afraid that if we help, that we will be retaliated against. And I think that's a big issue a lot of times, even with the young people, but even with adults. And so I didn't even know there was any social media awareness or anything like that. So is anything being done to kind of broaden that out so that, we can be made more aware? I think education is very important, just getting that out there. And I know the funding isn't there, but without the funding, if we don't do anything, it's just going to keep fumbling and getting worse. And I think it's just, if we have to figure out a way to try to educate everybody. So did y'all have the social media?
I'm not going to answer the social media question, but I'm going to answer about if you want to bring information forward to law enforcement, maybe you know something, but you would be scared about retaliation or in fear about something like that. What I can tell you is you're more than welcome to have my phone number, my cell phone number. You can email me, you can text me, or you can call me. If you email me or you text me, some of that stuff can be discoverable, which means the court can get it, the defense attorney can get it. If you tell me something like, Mark, there's a bunch of cars parked out in the parking lot, and one of them has its lights on. I may go outside and see a bunch of cars parked in the parking lot, and there's one vehicle with its lights on, and I can address the issue of that one vehicle. I don't need you anymore. You've already told me what I need to know. So at no point in time would I say, well, Rob Gevin told me that that vehicle had its lights on. And there's no reason for me to do that. So I hope that would ease some of your concern if you felt like you had to say something to law enforcement that could prevent a future crime. We're willing to listen, and we're willing to do everything we can to keep everybody out of it. It's much less paperwork for us, I promise.
First off, you may have misunderstood me on the social media. We don't use social media to try to curb the gang violence that we have. On social media, there's tons of sites on how to prevent a teenager from joining a gang and how to identify gangs or organizations in your area that you can look up. It's all there. What I was speaking about in social media, I cannot discuss because it's classified. Okay. But just to give you an example, I could tell you that a lot of these kids love to play Madden football on PlayStation and basketball. So I do too. And when I go online and play, I'm not who I say I am. And I can talk their talk. And they tell me what they want to brag about, and I just listen. And sometimes it may be from somebody in California or North Carolina or Texas, I don't know. But I listen for those bites that might be something local, and if it is, then I use it. Most of it's just trash. I can't do anything with it. But that's just an example. But anything else I have to tell you, it's classified because that's what we use to help not just get gang intelligence, but to stop.
Both the issue of what happens when grants run out, as well as some of the issues in the schools, parents not being involved. And, that gets us off into something that almost didn't seem like it was part of this discussion, and that's the diversity in our hiring. I have no doubt that when the grant funds run out, everybody who was involved in that previous activity that was funded continued that discussion in their own communities, in their own churches, with their own friends. I have friends of mine who are in law enforcement, just like Mr. West said, so I talk to them constantly. And where I'm going with that is that if we have teachers in the schools who live in some of the communities that are directly affected, they're going to work with those kids very, very differently than somebody who is going to leave and go home somewhere else. Law enforcement, fire, veterinarians, doctors, dog catchers, you name it. There are things that we do voluntarily and work hard at it voluntarily because we're working with our friends and our neighbors. And we see the outcomes and we get thanked for it on Sunday morning in church, or we get thanked for it in some other community group. So we really, in addition to this, need to put some effort into making sure that the people who are interacting with some of these kids are people from around them, from within their communities, who are going to work with them because they like them or love their parents or love somebody in the family. And I'm saying that as an educator with 41 years of experience, law enforcement experience. There's stuff that I do right now still voluntarily because I'm doing it for people whose parents and families I know personally and care about. It'd be a lot harder for me to go to Greenville and volunteer to do that. And I know it's tough in the schools. I know the teachers have a hard time. But I also have had violent experience with my son in school with a teacher who I know did not like my son. And I'm not imagining that. I have enough of an education, enough of a background to know that she resented the fact that my son was the only black kid in her class. I know that for a fact. And we don't weed that out. I'm willing to continue the volunteer effort. But I know that this problem is so tough, we are not going to solve it for pay. There's not one of us who can get paid enough. There's not enough money in any grant. There's not enough in the tax base. There's not enough anywhere to pay enough of us to do what we've got to do to stop this. We're not going to change that. There are people here from the church, and there are people here from other social groups. We're not going to change that unless we care enough that we're like all of our ex-military, that you care so much, you're almost willing to die. You care enough that you're saying, ship me over, and if it kills me, I will die with honor. But we've got a job cut out. And no, it's not easy.
I think the question you're asking is how to cure cancer. I mean,
Pretty much.
folks, law enforcement is ill-equipped to solve this problem because you have to remember what our role is.
Right.
By the time we get involved, somebody's shot somebody, somebody robbed somebody. The community, I mean, this is a systemic problem. This is going to involve the church. This is going to involve the schools. This is going to involve changing societal norms. I'm at the end of the line. You know, by the time I get called, somebody's messed up. So getting the community and getting this, we don't solve the problem. We solve the problem that the problem caused. You know, we solved the shooting. We solved the robbery. If you're talking about getting kids out of gangs or getting them disinterested in joining them, that's years before I got involved. I think the community, there's no way around it. There's absolutely no way around it. If I had the answer for this, trust me, I would bottle it and sell it, and I'd be a millionaire. But I don't. I mean, I can't do this by myself, especially from where I'm at, because like I said, I'm at the end of the line. The community and changing societal norms as a whole, that's where this has got to start, long before I get involved.
Section of streets, you know, like, say, like Alphabet Streets have so and such gang. Somebody over in Honeypath, they have like this, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the history lesson, Whitner Street, where as you're going down the hill where the gas station is, anybody know what that used to be called back in the day? Huh? That's Evansville. Evansville. And then when you get to the bottom and you make a left, and there's Evergreen Street and what we considered the old mill area with the houses, Little Texas. All right? That's Little Texas if you ever heard of it. All of those people worked in the mill, and they all held jobs because the mill paid for those houses. Mill workers who are uneducated, black, white, Hispanic, back in the day, it didn't matter. At the end of their shift, they drank beer. And then they pulled out their knives and they stabbed each other. And it was a violent area back in the 40s, 50s. Little Texas, Google it, enjoy the read. All right? Nowadays, it's not so much the same thing because we have laws like eviction. So if I don't pay my rent and I live on an Alphabet Street, I might get evicted, and then the only place I can move to is Simpson Road Apartments or something like that, okay? So now I've changed the geography of my gang. Whereas Little Texas couldn't do that because the mill paid for their house, so their gang was always Little Texas. So far, so good? We have had girls in a gang that wanted to be in the gang that had to get branded by the gang which caused a very serious burn and infection, and we had to get her to the Augusta Burn Center to deal with the gang symbol she put on her arm. And then we had to go get her parents, who lived in a $450,000 house off Concord Road. So it doesn't matter where you live. It matters how at risk of a person are you to fall into gang activity, and what kind of life are you leading, what kind of parents do you have, what kind of education are you interested in. It goes back to all of those root elements and the root causes of what a person could do that would make him at risk enough to be in
this up with is the United Way, these conversations, the Chamber of Commerce Task Force. We're pulling all this information in together to hopefully come up with some ideas, thinking outside the box. What we've been doing in the past doesn't seem to be working, but as we get all of this information together, I think we can bring the stakeholders back to the table. We're getting everybody that's participating in these conversations. We're going to reach back out to those folks that participated so that we can take all this information and come up with a plan to make Anderson County a better place. Will we solve these problems? No. I mean, I've been doing EMS for 40-something years. I've seen this problem for 40-something years. When he mentioned Randy Slagle, I mean, I remember working with him at the Sheriff's Department when I was at EMS. So, but things do change. We see different types of drugs. We see different kinds of activities. And we're just trying to gather enough information so that we can come up with a way to maybe improve problems in our county. We're never going to solve them, but you know, we're seeing the resources that the Sheriff's Department is putting out to try to stop this drug sales. They have a fusion center where they're sharing information, so we need to all work together to solve these problems. And getting volunteers and getting the community involved is what it's going to need. But that's something that United Way, their board of directors, Chamber of Commerce and their board of directors are interested in improving our community, and that's why we're pulling all this together. So this won't end here. This is just the beginning of our work.
As we conclude, I want to share a story with you. Several years ago, United Way decided that we were going to feed hungry children, didn't we, Kurt? And as we sat at the table with a representative from Golden Harvest Food Bank, she shared a story with us, and I hope Kurt will remember this. Her name was Kay, and Kay lived in Aiken, and she was in a Walmart one day and ran into a school teacher friend of hers. They began talking about a young boy that they both knew from elementary school age. He had killed a police officer. Kay asked the teacher, said, "What do you think went wrong?" And the school teacher said, "I know exactly what went wrong." She said, "I asked him one day, 'Why have you joined this gang?' He said, 'They feed me. We have pizza every Friday night.' And he said, 'If it were not for the gang, I would not have food on the weekends.'" I think, and that goes back to something that Mark said from the very beginning about some of the reasons why our children get involved with these activities. United Way and this community, organizations and individuals can come together and we can make a difference. We can support the men and women that work in law enforcement. We can help them, and I hope that as we finish this conversation tonight, as Greg said, this is just the beginning. We want to bring back stakeholders together. We'll be talking with Mr. Weathers. We want to make sure that we are looking in the depths of these complex and complicated issues and to see what we can do as a community to make where we live, the place we call home, a better place. I hope you will join me in thanking the panel that joined us this evening and their expertise. I want to thank Greg Shore again for his leadership with this as our advocacy chair at United Way and his work as coroner. We appreciate you, Greg. I also want to do a shout out we've had a number of elected officials that have been involved on and off in this series. In particular, tonight I want to thank Tom Allen for being here, one of our county council members. Judge Newton is here. Chief Stewart was here earlier. And the sheriff and the solicitor, many of our elected officials have been involved. We're going places with this. We're not going to let women like the one that came in my office the other day that said, we'll just be talking and nothing will come from it. Hold me to it. We are going to do something about these issues in our community.